You're listening to 3 Days Through the Wood, a novel by Bear Mawasaki, as read by the author. Chapter 13. The Last Leaves of Autumn. The morning began with a great clamoring that woke Pill in a start. He reached over the side of his bed to find the nightstand, searching for the source of the clattering bells and finding not an alarm clock, but a window. He gripped his pillow tight and held it over his face, breathing hard through the fluff and trying to silence the world beyond the bedroom. Cold bled through the window, staining the room with its icy touch. The wind wound its way through the walls, carrying with it the bite of morning frost and morrow snows, slowly sapping what little warmth remained in him even through the fleece and heavy blanket. The glass was misting along the window's edge, frozen to the touch, and outside the skies were gray, with the sun obscured by heavy, dark clouds moving in from far over the forest. The paper plate face watched him dimly through the dark. Pill's morning calculus slowly worked 2 and 2 to 4 as he recalled where he was and what he was supposed to be doing. Outside, the bell tower was tolling the start of another morning and another autumn's end. He noticed that at some point in the night, Mama Marie must have come by to bury him under another thick brown shroud, but it hadn't been enough. His body was still stiff and solid like the maples through the window, near bare and still stripping before his eyes as the breeze stole what little red remained of them. He thought his arm could break if he bent it too far, so stiff was his body. Even getting out of bed was a struggle, but he found his way to his feet regardless. It was Pill's third day in the wood. The inn was nearly empty of travelers. Mama Marie had been all too eager to spoil Pill as one of her few remaining guests. She asked about the nose, of course, and she had parsed the meaning of as many pauses and silences as Pill struggled to answer. She had seen many people come through town in her years and had heard their many stories. She'd heard this one before, but still sympathized with Pill in the quiet melancholy that lingers after a parting. "He's where he's supposed to be," she'd decided somberly. The creaking stairs announced Pill's entry down from the rooms and into the dining area. He made sure to check that he hadn't forgotten any of the few possessions remaining to him. His paper plate face was tucked neatly between shirt and fleece. A pine cone, one of the many bits of forest detritus left by Chirp along the shoreline, was tucked safely in his pocket. Mama Marie scuttled around behind Pill, offering him chocolates and pastries, desserts and hot broths that had been simmering all through the night, all while Pill insisted that all he really needed was to simply get going. She compromised on that front, offering him a breakfast on the go as he pulled his boots on. "You best be careful," she said, handing him a heavy bacon and egg sandwich packed between a thick home loaf. She stood back when Pill went for the door, bracing against the cold air that swept along the floor like a fog bank, racing over their ankles and around the many scattered chairs and tables of the dining hall before crashing against the heated shores of the fireplace. "Snow's coming. You sure you're going to be all right out there?" Pill bundled his fleece tight, flexing his hands through the holes in his sleeves before burying them in his pockets. If he was being honest with himself, he couldn't say that it would be warm enough to face the day. "I'll be all right," he lied. No. He hoped. "Thanks for letting me stay the night." "Anytime, kid," Mama Marie said, smiling. Pill had considered walking back right through town and into the forest the night before, only deciding against it once the light of the moon was lost behind the clouds. Stumbling blindly through the dark would have been a great way to break a leg, he thought, but now it seemed that might have been the better option anyway. It wasn't that much brighter outside now than it had been that night, despite the sun trying to rise. The clouds were simply too severe. Snows hadn't arrived just yet, but frost bit hard into the earth. Where yesterday Pill had felt the crisp crunch of leaves beneath his feet, today they were stiff with ice or otherwise sodden to mush in the morning dew. The path was both slick and tough underfoot. No one seemed all that eager to wake either, after the long festivities, and so he walked the streets alone even as the tower continued to toll loudly over the town. There were a few bleary-eyed faces looking through the windows and weighing their options before deciding that, no, the sun and sky were wrong and it simply wasn't time to wake yet. Occasionally he would see older folk made from sterner stuff walking in defiance of the weather, but they were few and far between. Nothing could stand against the force of habit and routine ingrained in old farmers, who woke to tend their grounds even when there was nothing left to tend. Streamers danced to tuneless winds as Pill surveyed the quiet festival grounds. Straw men dangled haplessly in the streets, turning their blank faces after him as he walked on by. It was unnerving to stalk the grounds of a public place after the public was gone, he thought. The sensation was one unique to lonely souls. It was the kind of quiet desolation that turned even mundane things mysterious and eerie. The town had a different color to it, he thought, without the crowds and lights of the festival, and it set a voice in the core of his being that told him he belonged here no longer. Chirp's absence at his side gnawed at him as well. The morning was too quiet. Where before the boy's chattering might have kept his mind at ease, or at least distracted it somewhat, now the silence was like a yawning void. There was an ever-present feeling that something was missing, an emptiness in his own thoughts that Pill couldn't quite bridge. His heart settled slightly when he reminded himself that Chirp was back where he belonged, with the people who loved him. He tried to imagine what the reunion might have looked like. Did Chirp's mom really look just like him, with the same messy auburn hair, only longer? The same face, but a little older? Had they greeted each other with the same smile and zeal for life that Chirp carried with him always, as they shared their stories of the wood and its denizens? The thought brought him comfort. But now was the time for Pill to focus on himself. That was the whole point of turning back, he knew. He had to face his reflection. To find himself again, he would have to stop running away. There was a home somewhere out beyond the forest that he had chosen to forget, and it was finally time to remember why. Of course, it's a lot easier to fixate on one's shortcomings than it is to fix them. When the cold stone of town fell behind and Pill entered the fields bordering the forest, life started to return to him. His step grew quicker, more sure-footed as the trees reached out in the wind to wave him home. The skeleton husks of tents and games grounds were slowly being taken down by the shadows lurking in the morning mists as the carnival of Mr. Scratch prepared its leave. They would be moving on soon, Pill thought, heading somewhere else entirely away from both the river and the forest, where they would outrun the growing storm. When he looked at the heavy snowdrifts falling on the distant forest, the thought briefly came to mind that Mr. Scratch's offer had been an open one. The carnival would remain beyond the cold claws of ice and regret for as long as they could run, and Pill could run with them. He tried not to let his thoughts dwell on it long, but the carnival had a pull of its own. The road seemed to wind around and around it, keeping it fixated in his periphery far longer than he found comfortable, while the forest continued to dance beyond the edge of his reach. No longer were there music and crowds and the sound of children laughing filling the air. There was no barker calling out attractions and distractions, directing visitors to their destinations. There was only the grumble of distant men hard at work. It was the sound of roaches scattering from the morning light. Pill tore his eyes away from the sight long enough to catch a glimpse of something else on the other side of the path. The scrubland surrounding the road was near barren, with formerly vibrant wildlife turned to a thicket of twigs at winter's withering touch. But there was something moving in the fallen leaves. He thought at first that it might be an animal, but then he heard snoring, light cursing, and the small whimper of someone sleeping rough in the cold. "Hey," said Pill cautiously, stepping off the road. "Are you all right?" The buried body continued to twitch and shiver beneath its ragged blanket of leaves. Pill wasn't sure what to do, so he inched closer. Maybe a festival-goer had had too much to drink and wandered too far off from the feasting grounds. He could see the dim frame of the stage where the band played still standing in the field. "Hey," Pill repeated, nudging the sleeping fellow with his foot. He pulled the sandwich from his pocket. "Come on, it's time to get up. How about something to eat?" There was a snort, a snarl, and then a thrashing. The sleeping figure woke as if from a terrible nightmare, and when they turned, their eyes were wide in fear. Pill recognized the furious face of the Rat Man. "Well, look who it is," Featherweight grumbled. His eyes darted to the sandwich in Pill's hand, and with the same practiced quickness he had used to claim Chirp's tickets, he snatched it. "Had a rough night 'cause of you. This your idea of an apology, kicking a man awake?" he spat between bites. "I just saw you sleeping in the bushes," Pill said uneasily. "I thought you might need help." "Help? Yeah, I need help." His eyes looked over the hills and fields, fixating on the carnival looming through the mists and shadow. "But not from you. You're why I'm in this situation in the first place." "All right," said Pill, backing away. "Well, I really didn't mean to bother you." He gave a small wave and returned to the road, not daring to take his eyes off the Rat Man. Keep the sandwich. That's it? A quick greeting and a sandwich and you're gone? No, I'm sorry, maybe? No, how you doing after I cost you your job? Real nice kid, really. Featherweight stood and stretched. That wasn't my fault, said Pill. He tried to broaden his shoulders. Did that make him look tougher? The Rat Man wasn't physically imposing by any means, looking more like a bundle of sticks than a tree proper, but he still stood taller than Pill's sproutling stature, and there was something dangerous in his eyes. Yeah, right. So where's the kid? Said Featherweight, keeping pace with Pill as they returned to the road. What, did you lose him? Some big brother you are. Ruthless. Reminds me of me. I didn't lose him, Pill said defensively. He's with his mom. His mom? Not yours? So what are you then, the babysitter? Something like that. Cold, stick-like fingers grabbed him by the shoulder. The Rat Man had closed the distance between them and held tight when Pill tried to pull away. I'm trying to conversate with you here. The least you could do is talk to me, Show a little civility. Don't just pretend like I'm not here. I don't want any trouble, said Pill, trying harder to pull away. The Rat Man's fist curled tight into his fleece, locking him in place. You cost me everything, you know that? You and your little friend, or your ward, or your playmate, or whatever. You owe me for that. Pill reached out and grabbed Featherweight by the collar in return. He didn't want to fight, but he wouldn't leave himself defenseless either. I don't owe you anything. The Rat Man's lips tightened to a sneer, and something dark sparked in his face. Pill balled a fist. Despite his appearance, he judged Featherweight to clearly be the stronger among them. A large shadow appeared on the road, breaking through the morning mist from the direction of the carnival. Before Pill could even think to yell for help, the shadow was already upon them. Featherweight noticed as Pill turned his head and managed to look just in time to catch a glimpse of the Barker descending. Oh, wait! He didn't get a chance to argue any further. In the same way he had grabbed Pill, the Barker grabbed Featherweight. Standing as tall as the two of them put together, Pill thought that the Barker had the advantage. Let the youth go, the Barker growled. Featherweight's hands were in the air immediately, palms up and fingers spread in meek surrender. I'm no longer employed by you. This is outside of park grounds and jurisdictions. I am a free agent. None of us are free from duty, said the Barker sadly. Mr. Scratch does not tolerate harassment of visitors, and he is as subject to the rules of this land as you are to his. You have broken contract. There are penalties to be paid for such behavior. I can only assume you have chosen to forgo your end of the arrangement by running from us, prompting, I'm afraid, further penalties. Screw you, said the Rat Man, trying to pull away. The Barker lifted him off his feet and let him dangle. I don't need this. I don't need you or Mr. Scratch. I want out, you hear me? You can't tell me what to do. You're not allowed. I'm not going back. Your destination, I'm afraid, was never up to either of us, said the Barker, and Mr. Scratch would like a word. It was only then that the Barker looked over to Pill, and his face softened significantly. Far fewer teeth were showing through his dog makeup than had been with Featherweight. How are you doing, young man? Are you all right? Did your friend find his family? Yeah, he did, said Pill, flattening his collar. And I'm all right. Thank you. The Barker nodded. The Rat Man tried to squirm, but couldn't escape his grip. And have you given further thought to the offer extended you by our keeper? Not to rush a decision, but we'll be on our way shortly. If you still wish to leave with us, now is your last chance. Cold winds swept up the road and over the fields, shaking the distant tents of Mr. Scratch and his carnival. The shadowed workers doubled their pace. I've thought about it, said Pill. His hands were shaking in his pockets, and he fought to keep his voice steady. I appreciate your invitation, and I want to thank you again for helping me. He glared at Featherweight. But I'm going to have to decline. I've got somewhere I need to be. Not out there, said the Rat Man, his eyes wide. You'd be a fool to face that by choice. But it is his choice, said the Barker, relaxing his shoulders and nodding to Pill. Some are made of stronger stuff than others. On behalf of Mr. Scratch and his traveling troupe, we regret to hear the news of your decision while respecting your freedom to make it. More quietly, he added, And an excellent decision it was, young man. Best of luck to you on the road ahead. He punched Pill lightly on the shoulder, then clapped him on the back, spinning him away from the skeletons and specters of the carnival grounds. Pill didn't look back once as he heard the struggle between Featherweight and the Barker continue behind him. He didn't know what Mr. Scratch had planned for those who broke contract with him, and he didn't want to know. He didn't care. Something told him that wherever Featherweight ended up was exactly where he deserved to be. There was a glow breaking through the clouds so bright that, for a moment, Pill thought the sun had returned, but it was followed by the long roar of thunder. The last of the fields finally passed behind, and the forest reached out to embrace him. Before long, he was passing the familiar stretch of road where Barbaba and her grandson lived. He couldn't make out their ugly old cabin through the trees, and although part of him wanted to stop and say hello, he knew his window to leave the forest was closing. Grizzly had warned that travel through the wood would soon become all but impossible, and so there was no time to waste. The hours were fleeting, and Pill needed to hurry. Still, he wondered while passing if the chicken coop would stay warm. Despite knowing that he needed to hurry, Pill found himself unintentionally slowing pace several times. Chirp's silence continued to echo behind him, and he found himself wanting to stop and wait for the boy to catch up. Not for a long while, he knew, would he see him come crashing through those trees again. Pill found himself feeling somewhat lonesome in the quiet, which was a feeling new and unfamiliar to him. It wasn't that he had never been alone before exactly. Even though he could remember little about himself, Pill understood implicitly that he had always been the quiet and solitary sort. Still, this was the first time he ever truly felt the absence of someone who wasn't family. He had made and left behind a true friend, and that wasn't a silence that could be filled easily. It followed him, he thought, and would always be part of him. But he understood too that Chirp was where he belonged, even at this moment, and that made him feel whole enough. Cold snows fell on yesterday's road, heralding the arrival of winter proper. Pill felt the sting in his cheek as the wind whipped past him, felt the first flecks of ice starting to form in his hair. He pulled his hood up and shivered as it melted down the back of his neck. Snow was landing in wet clumps that hit the ground with an inaudible smack, clinging to the leaves and bark of the trees and forming into small mounds on the earth. It hung off his fleece like burrs. Pill had to brush himself continuously as he walked. Even with the sun rising higher, racing behind the clouds, it couldn't outpace the snow. Snow chased as quickly as the light over the forest floor, and patches of frost grew out from the dark corners of the wood. The canopy of trees looked like it would soon crust over, burying the forest black and trying to swallow the little gaps of light remaining on the road. That road stretched on back into the fathomless forest. Home was somewhere beyond it. Pill walked, hoping he would make it before the cold could claim him.